does a D minor 7, except he puts the 8th fret B string on top, and that's the 4th of the chord, or the 11. C should be a D minor 11, but that's the same note that we had in the melody. So that's a way of kind of like taking the melody and tying it across all the other chords. You know, you got this. That melody's note still there, and then it's still there. Cool. In a way, it kind of relates to what we did with the Steely Dan style, where we had a chord that was static and we moved the bass line over it. In this case, we have a melody that's static and we move the chords over it. Cool. All right, then the what he's got here, that whole part, he put a G7 over this, right? Again, all that could have been C, like, right, going up to the sus4, you know. But one thing that sounds like a problem with it, and it's not really a problem because it goes by quick, but it's kind of an old rule about, if that is a passing tone, then you want to move away from it in stepwise motion. People don't really think about that kind of thing so much anymore, but that was like an old school rule back in the day. And so if we're gonna have this, the way you can work out your arrangements is, instead of thinking about this being a C chord, for example, C major 7, that goes 3 to 4 to the 6th, which means you went from a dissonance, really, like the 4 over a major 7 chord. The 4 is a dissonance because it's kind of clashes with the 3rd. You'd be moving away from a dissonance to an imperfect consonance, the 6th, by a leap or a skip, rather than by a step. And so what'd be better is if you found a chord that you could avoid that problem. So what we have here anyway is a G7, which means our first note is the 6th, which goes up to the 7 by a step, and then to the C major 7 chord. Anyway, that kind of solves that problem. But so the G we have here is a G13, and then the G7, where you just move the 6 up to the 7. Cool? And that's that melody that goes. Right? So the first time, this melody had no chord with it. The chords followed. And this part of the melody had no chords with it. Right? This time, the second time there, the melody has a chord with it. And this time, this melody has a chord with it as well. Cool. And that's before it goes to the next part. And it's going to continue up with this chord scale approach. Anyway, so then there's one other thing too, is that when he plays this part, oops, sorry, the G13, you could just do it like this, right? Into the next. It actually sounds really nice. It's easy to play. Oops. But yeah, so that's not very wild to play, because really you're just kind of changing your pinky, right? It's only the pinky that changes, and of course the low string from the E string to the A string. But what you hear is a little bit of like a slide from this, and you hear that the third of the chord is carried with it, like that. So we've got the 3rd and the 6th of the chord that move up to the 4th and the flat 7. So it's kind of like moving, like if you did something like this, where you're moving a whole chord up, you know, it'd be it's kind of the same principle, except you're just moving a couple notes up the scale instead of just one. Cool. So it's kind of like, it's not like really you're moving full chords around, but it sounds more full, like a big chord. Anyway, and that's what he does here. We got this like that. So you do get a little sus sound in there. And then, again, that's kind of optional, but you get the concept. And instead of just moving, and obviously we could move them all like that, because this would be a major 7, that would clash really hard. But this one you can do, because it doesn't clash. And that brings us to this part, the part where we have the melody that's going to start ascending. So he used the same voicing here that we used on the second time through that melody. Then it's going to move up to the D minor, and that's a D minor 13. So here I've just got like this shape, right? Except I don't have my ring finger here, and I'm not going to play that D string. So it's just that. And the melody is on the 7th fret of the high E string, that B note. That's the 13. Cool. So a 13 here is kind of tense, but diatonically it's good because it's from Dorian. If you were reharmonizing it yourself to try other things, you know, you kind of might have to, depending on how far out you go. Like if you stop using diatonic stuff and you use the minor chord and you have a 13 in it, you might want to, you know, make sure that the 13 doesn't clash too hard. But I mean, then again, it may not be a problem anyway, depending on how tight you are about it. So that is how he ascends. Now, the next chord that I said we had after D minor, I don't know if I talked about this actually. We've got this C major 7 to the D minor 7, and then E minor 7, and it's just ascending. Well, what he does is he puts another passing tone, a passing chord between the between this, that part, right? So we have, and you kind of would expect to hear this: C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, right? Do you hear how that works? All right, cool. And so what he does, though, is instead of doing this, he saves the E minor for the next part where it goes this part. Now, it would be dull if we went like this, right? We go C major, D minor, E minor, E minor, to go. Now, I mean, if I did it, I'd feel fine about it because I don't feel like, you know, like, I think Joe Pass is much higher standard as far, like, not to say I would want to be as awesome as him, but like, if I played the rest of the tune as awesome as he did, and then I did E minor 2 times in a row, I wouldn't, like, you know, be lashing my back or anything. So it's not like, you know, I wouldn't worry about it too much. But basically this, even though it works, it's still correct and good. A trick you can do is have another passing chord, right? So one might think, well, this is where we can do our diminished again, right? Like we could do C major, D minor, D sharp diminished, right? So I'll just use this voicing. And then our E minor, like this. See how that worked? It's kind of about not like using up all of your diatonic chords at once, you know, and to create the passing tones. Plus, the kind of chromatic effect sounds really hip anyway. Especially if you're, you know, I mean, if you're doing it like by leaving it and approaching it stepwise, which is how those diminished chords work. Just like we did this, 1 chord, flat 2 diminished to 2 minor, right? Here doing the same thing, D minor, diminished to E minor, right? Same exact principle. Now, that would be like a first approach, like that, or a final one even. There wouldn't really be any need to go past that, I don't think. It sounds good. Now, what Joe Pass did here in the song is he didn't do D sharp diminished or E flat diminished or whatever. He did a minor chord, actually. So he does this. Instead of like, very subtle difference. Right? He's got a flat 7 in it, which obviously wouldn't work if we had a diminished triad, or a diminished 7 chord where we'd have a double flat 7. So anyway, what he does in this passing chord is he didn't use a diminished chord in the whole step between the diatonic chords. He used a minor 7 chord. Now, there's 2 ways that you can do this. One, we went up a half step from the previous chord, or we can anticipate the next chord from approaching it from below a half step. In this case, both chords are minor 7 chords, so there's really no way to tell which way he'd be thinking. But it's probably a lot easier. I imagine that the ease of it is probably what kind of created this decision. Rather than going for a diminished chord, if we got D minor that goes to E minor, it's very easy to go D minor, E flat minor, E minor. It's just that simple. Here's my chord to this chord, and I'm just going to walk through there chromatically using the same shape, you know? Now, with the same shape, he puts the melody on top, which is different, as opposed to whole step, and this time it goes half step. So it's like, cool. Really, the only difference is that our passing chord has a flat 7 in it rather than a double flat 7, which is actually just one more chromatic, like, passing note, because a double flat 7 from E flat would be the C note, and that's in our key, while our root wouldn't be. You know what I mean? So it's like if you're looking at every note as it relates to the key center, it's just having a E flat minor chord is just one more note that's outside of the key than the diminished had. And also it's easy to do it like that. If you have a song and you have a melody that does anything like this, by the way, where you're just ascending or whatever, even if it's like in a small little moment, it's as simple as doing C major, D minor, E minor, F major, right? And I just did the diatonic stuff.